Well, for more now on the reaction in Moscow, I'm joined by FSN reporter Stuart Smith. Stuart, what is the feeling like within Russia at the moment? Has that prospect of reservists being called out brought the war closer to ordinary Russians?
Yeah, certainly. I'd say the main feeling that you can hear expressed on social media and talking to people in person is surprise and fear. For a lot of families, especially those that had no stake in Ukraine, this was something that for the past few months could have quite easily been forgotten, that Russia was conducting a so-called special military operation, as it must be called here, in Ukraine. And for many families, it was easy to ignore, with prices for imported goods indeed going up slightly and Western brands disappearing, but all of that seemingly under control. For anyone not closely following Russian state media, it would have seemed like this was going as planned, and even for those following, it wouldn't have seemed as desperate as this. But now everyone will be aware and worrying about whether their fathers, brothers or sons will be conscripted, and I've spoken to families where that's also become a point of debate within the family. So you might have some brothers or sisters, some mothers, saying that these people should try to leave the country as soon as possible, as many of them have attempted to do, either via airports or via land borders, while others are trying to convince their sons or fathers to fight, saying that this is indeed, as the Russian president says, a war for Russia's survival. He's saying it's a special military operation in Ukraine, but making the distinction that NATO is at war with Russia, and therefore all measures need to be taken, such as conscription and, as we heard earlier, the threat of nuclear weapons. And so it is dividing families and also causing much concern.
Well, Stuart, protest is effectively criminalised in Russia, but we have seen some in Moscow this week in the wake of that announcement by Putin.
Yeah, that's right. It takes a lot to bring people to the streets now, because indeed the punishments are severe, prison terms as well as major fines, and no illusions about how brutal the police can be when trying to detain protesters. But indeed people did come out, by no means record numbers. It's been for months now clear that protest is not a means by which people, certainly not at the numbers that have been seen before, can change the mind of the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The numbers from an NGO that monitor detentions across Russia say 1,300 people have been detained across 38 cities. Worryingly, for some of the men going to these protests, in at least 4 police districts, it's been reported that people are being immediately, if they are young fighting-aged men, sent to conscription centres. So those that come out to protest what's going on in Ukraine immediately sent then to fight as part of that contingent of 300,000 troops. And it's also notable that during these protests, at least in Moscow that I saw yesterday, a far greater majority of women, I'd say about 80% to men. Clearly, they are concerned about being on the wrong end of the law at such a dangerous time.
Yeah, well, Stuart, the threat of nuclear and chemical weapons being used by Russia is rattling many globally. Is that prospect also rattling Russians?
I would say so, but I think it's also become something Russians are very used to, to be honest, because on state television, frequently nuclear warnings are given to other states, those that are alleged to be infringing upon Russia's territorial sovereignty. That's nothing new, and you'll see graphics of what it would look like if certain countries in Western Europe were to be bombed. Of course, Russia always says it would only ever be in response to a threat from the West, but two things worth noting here that make it particularly pertinent for Russians in this situation. First of all, it does not have to be a nuclear threat to which Russia responds, only one which it believes is violating potentially its territorial integrity. Now that could be what's already going on in Ukraine. The president, in his speech on Wednesday, made that clear. The other thing is, Russian territory is about to become only partially controlled parts of Ukraine. When these regions in when these referendums go ahead in those 4 regions of Ukraine, they will become part of Russia, but they're only partially right now under the control of Russia's armed forces, and that means that this will be considered Russian territory which needs defending.
Well, Stuart Smith in Moscow, thanks so much for your analysis here on 8 o'clock.